IVM.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast supported by Pragati, a flagship media initiative of the Takshashila Institution. We're a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like to bring a fresh perspective to Indian affairs and an Indian perspective to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello and welcome to another episode of All Things Policy. Today, I, Aarthi, and my colleague Ruturaj are going to be talking about the effect of the pandemic on childhood obesity. So we know that obesity is such an important problem that the WHO has coined the term Globesity. And childhood obesity affects nearly 50 million girls and 74 million boys worldwide. During the pandemic, social isolation and stay-at-home orders dramatically changed the daily routine of children and adolescents, and this has largely impacted their lifestyle and well-being. There's been a decrease in physical activity levels and an increase in sedentary behavior, which resulted in weight gain, especially in children. It's also important to note that obesity is the most common comorbidity in severe cases of COVID, which clearly shows that there is a correlation between nutrition and COVID. So now that we have a brief overview about the situation, I'm going to ask Ruturaj whether there have been any instances or any surveys that have been done around the world to prove that this is an actual problem.
Yes. So as we know, in the first wave, Italy was hit pretty badly in terms of there's a sheer number of COVID cases and COVID deaths. So what Italy actually did was they commissioned a study, especially to look at how COVID, was affecting Italian children, to be specific. And one part of that was they decided to observe 41 kids who were slightly overweight before the pandemic began, and the study wanted to do was figure out whether their daily routines had changed because of restrictions due to COVID and change in school timings and the way lectures were delivered and whatnot, and see if within a year the children went up or down. So this was conducted in Italy. It's a prospective study in the sense these kids were observed for a given period of time. Data was actually being collected actively. So these were 41 overweight kids, and what came out of the study was that they figured out that children, especially these children, were eating an additional meal per day. They were sleeping almost an extra half hour per day, and 5 hours per day was spent, just in front of the screen because schools were closed and lectures and tuitions were delivered through a smartphone or a laptop. And also there was an increase in a consumption of sugary drinks, junk foods, and red meat. And these children were not active to begin with, but in that particular year, that is 2020, the physical activity went even down. So what the study, conclusively sort of showed that, yes, that you can actually find a very acute effect in terms of change in weight and the way lifestyle of children was affected by the COVID, not actually COVID, but the restrictions that were placed due to COVID. I'm pretty sure other countries also had certain observations. Aarthi, do you know any other such studies?
Yeah, speaking of school closures and lockdown, I think it's pretty well known that the US does provide midday meals for primary school kids and even nurseries, and these children rely on the food provided for up to 2/3 of their daily dietary needs. But because of school closures, children started to miss a vital source of nutrition, which increases the chance of food insecurity and also bad food habits. And because of this, there are a lot of fast food companies that have sort of like monopolized on the situation, where they have indicated their willingness to replace missed meals. And so, for instance, in the UK, McDonald's had offered to provide 1 million free meals last October during the school break. So, while this is a sort of like generous offer, it's not the healthiest option for kids. And because this sort of these meals are just readily accessible, it is more likely that you will see, children adopting these sort of habits, because these are the companies, or I mean, these are the restaurants that are sort of like taking initiative. And this is something we will look at a little later. But so this has been the situation internationally. But like in India, Rituraj, have you seen any change in behavior of like lifestyle habits, or what the situation's been like?
Yeah, so what happened in India is the exact reverse, because what we have is a different kind of problem. Obesity and it's just empty calories. It's also part of malnutrition, but we have a problem where Indian kids are underweight and below, and even stunted. And midday meals that are offered through schools is actually, for some families, guaranteed meal for their kids. So let's say when the schools were closed due to a pandemic, or migrant workers actually left cities and went back to their villages, kids in these households not getting a guaranteed meal per day. So some stats indicate that there are 115.9 million children in India who are enrolled in midday meal schemes, and majority of these children didn't get access a midday meal during the pandemic period, but especially the periods when there was total lockdown. And what happens is obesity and overeating, and it's not a very straight link. It's a very complex story, and at times it's counterintuitive. So what happens is there are a couple of studies which are very counterintuitive. What they have shown is that if a infant or if a child is undernourished for first 10 years, let's say 10 to 12 years of his or her life, and then somehow manages to, typically through upward mobility, manages to find steady source of income and then steady food source, as the undernutrition, the undernourished parts of the years, the body is severely affected by these undernourished years. And then once in the middle ages, when there is steady source of food and nutrition, the chances of these kids becoming obese is far more higher compared to a person who had steady nutrition from the childhood and is eating similar calories and similar quality of food at that particular age. So what might happen in India is we are not seeing a rise in childhood obesity to that extent, but these children who might have missed a midday meal, for whom midday meal was the only source of a nutritional balanced diet, actually suffer from effects of obesity far later in their lifetime. And it would be very difficult to actually correlate weight gain and other health issues related to weight gain in these children who would grow up eventually. But one of the reasons could be undernourishment because of COVID-19 pandemic. So in India, the case is reverse, but in the end, it might lead to obesity. So COVID-19 in a way is leading to obesity, but in India's case, it's going to be a very delayed effect, and it's worth investigating because as some statistics says, it's 115.9 million children. So it's a huge number of people, Indians, who might get affected by obesity. So one reason for childhood obesity, especially seen in Indian cities and Western countries, and also very rich, even Middle Eastern countries like Qatar or Bahrain, where obesity rates are rising, is the effect of online marketing of fast food and sugary drinks, soda drinks. So I think so we should dwell on the impact of online marketing and how it affects unhealthy food trends, how it creates unhealthy food trends in children, and that then leads to a lot of problems. Aarthi, do you want to come in here?
Yeah, absolutely. So, jumping back to something we had spoken about earlier, where Ruturaj talked about, how children are spending more time in front of a screen and because of online classes, but also like a lot on social media, there's a lot of mindless scrolling. And we also spoke about how, McDonald's in the UK sort of monopolize on this situation. And it's not just, restricted to a particular geographical location. Like around the world, since everybody, is under lockdown, even as adults, we do spend so much of time looking at our phones and on social media, and even like, so imagine like you have a long day of work or a long day of classes, and you're just really tired and you just don't feel like cooking yourself a meal. So the easiest thing to do is open a food delivery app and order what's available or the cheapest available option. And it's this thought, or it's this action that the fast food industry has sort of, used to their advantage. And especially even for children, right? Like obviously you want to make it look as appealing as possible. So you promote like discounts, or, that's one way to do it. But during the pandemic, what these fast food restaurants have done is that, assuming, you order from them, when you reach a checkout page, they say you can make a certain amount of donation to the frontline workers. So it looks like, whatever you're doing is going towards a good cause. So I think it's very interesting that, on one side, you are trying to support somebody else, but on the other side, it does come at the cost of your own well-being. So I think, and so this new marketing strategy has been coined COVID washing by a couple of researchers in the University of Auckland. So interestingly, there was a content analysis done of social media posts in New Zealand from Feb to May of 2020 of the largest fast food organizations. And the result was that 14 out of 20 of these brands referenced COVID in their posts during this 4-month period, and it peaked during the nationwide lockdown restrictions. So the most common themes that were present in 36% of all the posts referred to COVID, and it was drawn on feelings of community support. Like as we mentioned, you order from so-and-so restaurant, certain donation goes to supporting the frontline workers. And there were other themes that were quite common, such as, brand-related isolation activities, or, messages that have consumption helps with coping. And like I said, imagine you're isolating and you're just feeling really low. And for most people, fast food is a comfort food because it's just easily available, and no matter what people say, it does obviously taste good, right? I mean, that's one of the reasons why it is so unhealthy. But the industry has sort of used these feelings of isolation and confusion and all of these things to their advantage, and it has affected children the most. And because like we said, children are spending so much of time online, most of these advertisements are targeted towards children. And this is the harsh reality, So even though all of us are staying indoors and trying to be safe and, to prevent ourselves from getting COVID, there are other side effects of being stuck inside. And one of the biggest things is, like we are talking about, is obesity. So now that we've looked at the situation, I think it's important to see what kind of policies we can come up with. And we will explore that a little more after the break.
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Advertising is Dead, Varun talks to the co-founder of Sleepy Owl Coffee, Arman Sood, about how he markets coffee to a generation that was raised on drinking tea. On Postcards from Nowhere, Utsav narrates an intriguing story that connects Shimla, rare books, and the American Declaration of Independence. On Agla Station Adulthood, meet writer Priyam Saha. She tells Ritasha and Ayushi about the overly romanced concept of life in the city. On a show about crypto, Rohan figures out what Web 3.0 is with the co-founder of Vault, Darshan Patija. And on Smarter with Sid, Siddharth takes us through the journey of the BlackBerry and what its future is. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Also, don't forget to rate us on any of the platforms you're listening to us on. And you can also check us out on YouTube. You can have a list of all of our shows at ivmpodcast.com/YouTube. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Bank of Baroda and CoinSwitch Kuber.
Okay, so welcome back. Before the break, we talked about the effect of the pandemic on childhood obesity, and we talked about how online marketing has only made it worse. So now we want to try and figure out what kind of policies we can implement to help prevent this situation. So maybe we can look at a couple of case studies from around the world and see how we can apply it to the Indian context. So, for instance, in 2019, the London public transport banned unhealthy food advertising. And I think that's a really great initiative, because obviously in London, people do take public transport a lot. And, you see a lot of these banners and these across on buses or in the tube station. I think it's a really great initiative to ban unhealthy food advertising because, obviously the more time you look at it, it's similar to online advertising, right? Like the more you look at it, the more tempted you are to indulge in that. So I think that's a pretty great initiative. And also last year, the UK has also come up with an initiative to ban advertising on food and drinks that are high in fat, salt, or sugar across all forms of digital media before 9 p.m. on television. And this is supposed to come into effect by 2023. And it's interesting that, they've specified before 9 p.m. because that it's sort of targeted towards children, because you make the assumption that children go to bed early. So you want to reduce the amount of exposure to these sort of advertisements to children. So I think that is a pretty innovative policy that the UK government has come up with. Ruturaj, have you come across anything else internationally or maybe in India?
Yeah, this reminds me of Michelle Obama's campaign "Let's Move." I think so. That's what it was called, and it also involved U.S. public schools banning fried food and foods with high sugar and soda drinks, basically in their cafeteria. So I think so. This conversation, I mean, the relation between food and childhood obesity is pretty well established, and I think many countries are doing innovative policies to stem this tide. So here, I mean, I think so. The case of Mexico is also worth mentioning. So Mexico actually had an excise tax on sugar beverages. So just like the tobacco sin tax, where you pay more to buy cigarette or other tobacco items than the actual manufacturing price. Mexico tried to do something similar to sweetened beverages. So, and this policy actually goes way before COVID pandemic. This was done in 2014, early 2014. And what they actually did was followed the sales of sugary drinks, and they found that there was a decrease in 7.6% in terms of sales if a particular beverage was taxed in a particular region of Mexico. While if in certain other regions, if the same beverage was not taxed, there was actually an increase in the sale of of those drinks. So what it shows is, if you bring these tax, which are not very popular, especially with the food lobby, the sugar lobby, but if done properly, it does have an effect in ensuring that there is a reduction in consumption of these sugary drinks. So then the next logical question would be, fine, the sale of these drinks reduced, but then did it actually have an effect on obesity? And the answer is yes. So the same study, sort of followed what happened beyond post 2014, and they found out, and these are projections. These are not prospective studies. These are projections. that it would have these sort of reductions in purchase of sweetened drinks would have prevented almost 200,000 instances of obesity, and 40% of those would be among children. And then if we put a dollar value or a peso value in this context to what would have been the effects in terms of health issues or productivity loss because of health issues, some of the estimates are like for each. To put it simply, these projections say that there can be a reduction up to 4 times when it comes to healthcare costs. So a very small tax of 1 peso per liter on a sugar drink can end up saving you $4 per every dollar when it comes to health spending. So yes, I mean, obesity is a huge problem, and we need variety of innovative policies to really drive down this message and change behavior of children and also adults in many cases. Do you have any such instances, Aarthi, about India doing something similar?
Yeah, I think one thing that caught my attention was how, I mean, we spoke about midday meals earlier on, right? So I think what was very interesting was that Kerala was actually one of the first to start delivering meals to children at home. And it was incredible, the number of children that they reached. It was nearly like, it was over like 2 lakh children within about like 12,000 schools. And the menu, the kind of food that they offered was such a well balanced meal. It included carbs, it included proteins and vegetables. And I think this is just so important, to take this sort of initiative across the country. And maybe other states are doing it, but because it's still an ongoing issue, the amount of data available is quite limited. But if you as listeners have come across anything else, please do let us know. It would be really helpful for us to know, and we can also spread the awareness about other initiatives. And I think it's really important that we address these issues together and also raise awareness together. So please do let us know if you have come across any other such initiatives. Ruturaj, do you have any final thoughts, any inputs, any suggestions?
Yeah, to conclude, I would say obesity is a very nasty condition, in the sense it doesn't directly affect health, but it can lead to a variety of health issues. And the link between just overeating and leading to obesity, I mean, it's a very simplistic way of looking at it. I mentioned even undernutrition during initial stages of a person's life can lead to obesity in the Middle Ages. So it's not just consumption of more calories, but it's the consumption of a balanced diet rather throughout the life of a particular individual, and that will actually ensure that people don't become obese. So what to conclude again, these sort of peaks of high calorie diet and then periods of a low calorie diet, it disturbs nutritional balance of the body, and then these effects actually sort of get entrenched in the body. And even after correction in terms of quality of nutrients or the frequency of meals, because of the initial diet, maybe undernourishment or maybe even overnourishment, it can lead to obesity. So the aim of the policies, number of policies that we saw and also we don't know of, but what the policies seem to be doing is to be ensuring a balanced, steady diet for children especially, so that they don't become undernourished, nor do they become obese, but remain healthy throughout these programs. Okay, with that, let's end this episode.
Yeah, thank you, Ruturaj, and thank you everybody for listening. Yeah, stay safe, but also stay healthy.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.
If you're a cricket fan, check out Edges and Sledges, India's favorite cricket podcast.
The podcast focuses on Indian cricket, the IPL, and has a ton of banter both on and off the field.
We talk about the week's biggest cricket stories with current and ex-international cricketers, coaches, or sometimes just between us.
And it's hosted by me, DJ.
Me, Varun.
And me, Ashwin.
New episodes release every week.
You can catch us on the IVM Podcast's website, app,
or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Check out the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast.
सफर, रास्ते, मंजिल और मुकाम अक्सर ये हमसे कुछ कहना चाहते हैं, पर हम हैं कि अपनी रोजमर्रा की जिंदगी में इन्हें सुनने से कतराते हैं। नमस्ते दोस्तों, मेरा नाम है केशव चतुर्वेदी और मैं आपको ले चलूंगा कुछ ऐसे सफर पर जहां आपको एक नया नजरिया मिलेगा सफर और मंजिलों को देखने का। आइए इन किस्से कहानियों में डूब जाएं। हर मंगलवार और शुक्रवार